A weekend Leinster side got exactly what they deserved against the Stormers. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. Right to start, we have Manny Lebock just completely skies the start of the kickoff, and it only goes like 2 or 3 meters or something. So scrum back to Leinster, but then like just he makes a mistake, then Leinster make a mistake. I think it was Foley was a scrum half, right? And wherever way he fed it, I think he hit one of his own players, and the ball is kind of just sitting there in the middle. Leinster just under too much pressure. They actually hooked the ball, and Stormers win the penalty as Milne angles inwards, and Stormers were on top in the scrum for pretty much most of the game. When Leinster's replacements come on, actually, they did stabilise it a little bit though. Stormers then, though, they missed touch with the penalty, and thinking like, which side is actually going to get something right at this stage? Then they're offside as well, and Leinster have a penalty. Leinster go up the line, they spread it from the line out, but poor pass from Leinster, and actually Wilmsel snapples it up and releases Ben Loader, and he's just gone. The guy has great pace. He's over for a try. It's converted for 7-0. Leinster then go to the corner from a penalty, but again, another error allows the Stormers to break. They kick the ball downfield. Foley gets there first, and he looks to run it out of his own 22, and initially does well, kind of slaloming even his way through a couple of players, but knocks on a contact. And yeah, just too many errors from Leinster early on. But that's what you get. I said they deserve what they got, and they did. Just you could see in terms of the these players all playing together, like for a lot of them it's the first time with certain combinations that they've been together for this team, and it really showed as well. Stormers then they drive over the Leinster line, but they actually get held up, and they're looking to do what the Lions did last time out, and that is to win the game before half time. And they win another penalty with that dominant scrum. There's a clear knock on, but we play on. Stormers get it into 22, and it was Foshia, I think, goes for a missed pass, and he skips Weber, but there's nobody outside, so it just goes straight into touch, and it's a chance missed. And this is the weird thing, was that like Stormers, again, they deserved to win, and they were the better of the two teams, but it wasn't like a brilliant Stormers performance. Honestly, there was a lot of mistakes on their side as well. Have another Stormers scrum penalty though. Alalatoa goes to ground, and they kick this under the post. Lebock makes it 10 points to 0. Leinster then have a try from Liam Turner chalked off due to a tackle off the ball by Marco Lean in the build-up. Was though a clever kick through that led to the chance in the first place. A little bit of invention from Leinster that we hadn't really seen up to this point in the game. Lebock then increases the Stormers' lead after a neck roll from Leinster, and then Rob Russell then does well to get Hartzenberg into touch from a cross kick, and it was one of those where if he'd missed that, then the Stormers were in for another try. But there is a tackle off the ball, and the Bach then makes it 16-0 from the tee. Leinster offside with the clock in the red. Stormers off for a scrum, and they're looking for that second try, and then they managed to drive over after a powerful scrum. Moratis a score converted by Lebock for 23-0 and half time. And yeah, the game feels done and dusted at this stage, given what Leinster have served up in that first half. Then if Leinster were looking, to have a lift after the break, maybe, getting G'd up in, from the coaches in the dressing room to, come out fighting, but completely dashed in the opening minute. Janchis snipes over Leinster, just no pillar defender, at a ruck, and it's an easy run in for him. Converted for 30 points to nil. And then everyone now knows the game is gone, and Leinster really need to try just to keep the score down at this point. They don't want the embarrassment that they had last year where they got absolutely destroyed by the Bulls. So Leinster start to come into the game a little bit at this stage. They're camped on that Stormers line, and they finally get something on the board. Deegan comes on a nice angle behind the ruck and goes over the score. Conversion makes it 30 points to 7. Then, hadn't had a sniff of a try for most of the game, and suddenly they have a second one a minute later or 2 minutes later, wherever it was. And this time, Deegan shows good pace down the left wing, then gives the pass inside for Russell, and he goes in from a long way out. Conversion hits the post at 30 points to 12. And then we have a lovely slick move from Leinster off the back of a more solid scrum. And we saw, as I said, towards the kind of the last quarter or so of the game, their scrum improved a lot, and they almost get Russell through a gap. He does make some decent ground. Ruse then gets a yellow card for infringing at the breakdown. Leinster up for a scrum, but they get free kick for an early engagement, and momentum completely lost. And it was such a weird thing like that. Whatever about opting for the scrum, but make sure that you set up properly. You don't give any reason for the referee to ping you, because, as I said, Leinster struggled in the scrum for the whole for most of the game. They were looking a little more solid, but still you have to feel like it's almost like on best behavior, right? Don't do anything stupid. They did something stupid, and that free kick, Stormers are able to clear it then. And then we have Leinster engage early again in the scrum, and now it's upgraded to a penalty for a second offence. LeBock goes for a kick at goal. It's from just inside his own half, drags it left and wide, but you felt at that stage that there was that little kind of just small period of the game where suddenly, I guess because I'm a Leinster fan, you're thinking maybe something is on here. Maybe we can get back within even a score and get a losing bonus point out of this game, or maybe we can get 4 tries and get a bonus point that way out of the game. But you felt like Leinster, they had that couple of minutes where things are really going their way, and then as soon as it flipped back the other way, then you could see that they couldn't wrest that momentum back at all. But so this time then Leinster applying some great pressure during the yellow card period, but Stormers are just holding them out. And it feels like that a little bit of extra space that they were finding when they got those couple of tries just isn't there, and the meters that were getting in the carries just isn't there either. And Stormers then, they come forward from a penalty, and they're beginning to stretch the Leinster defence now. Loader with a good carry up the left, and then they go back inside, and Engelbrecht goes over the score through a gap close to the post. LeBock converts for 37 points to 12. Bonus point in the bag now for the Stormers. And then right at the end, we have just an absolute piece of magic from the Stormers. Well, actually from Holland. So the ball, Stormers are playing the ball right to left towards the left-hand touchline, and Leinster have numbers out there. Holland, I don't know who he had. It's somebody in there in support, and he does one of these ones where it looks like he's going to maybe do a one-hand offload to him, but he doesn't. He puts the arm out and he sells a dummy to 2 Leinster players who absolutely completely buy it. And then he just puts the afterburners on down the left. They're gone completely the other way. They're, those two guys are probably still going the wrong way, I'd say, at this point. But then he's down the left 1-on-1 and gets over in the corner. Just if you don't watch, even as a Leinster fan, I know we don't like to watch our own team when they lose, etc. Right? But just if you're any kind of rugby fan at all, and whether you watch anything else from this game, just watch that little piece there, like that final try, just the dummy, is amazing. I'm sure it's going to be on, you know, who is it? There's a guy Ford or something, right? He does compilations. Sure, he's going to do a compilation now of amazing dummies, and that's going to be on there. It has to be. It was just such magic from him, and even as a Leinster fan, it just made me smile. It was just that good. So he gets over. Lebock hits the post with the conversions, 42 points to 12, and that's how the game finished. So, as I said, Leinster deservedly, getting a bit of a walloping. Stormers, yes, they won comfortably, but was it a brilliant performance from them? No. Was there some brilliant play from them? Is the other thing, though. Yes, there was, but there was a lot of mistakes from them too, and it felt like a like a better team than this Leinster team would have taken advantage of that and maybe made this a much closer game than it turned out to be in the end. But we'll talk a little bit more about that after we have a look at the stats. So let's do that. Let's have a look at the stats from the game. So first up on attack, tries scored, 5 tries to 2. Possession was 45 to 55. So Leinster having plenty of the ball, but not really being able to do much with it because there, as I said, there was a lot of errors. You had players who were obviously misaligned in attack. Timing was off. The passes weren't as sympathetic as we used to them being, and there was only a few times when they clicked, that little spell where they seemed to click, and then it left them again. Clean breaks 12 to 7. Some of the Stormers' clean breaks obviously led to tries, especially like the loader one there. Defenders beaten then 25 to 11. Leinster, I praise them a lot for that scramble defense, but today it wasn't there. Stormers get in behind, and you were pretty sure that they were going to score. Offloads then 13 to 10. So Stormers kind of hitting all of the good stats there and making it count as well, because we see a lot of games where a team can have more clean breaks, more defenders beaten, and more offloads, and you struggle to find many that actually had impact on the results of the game, but not the case today. Stormers really were on it at times, as I said, not completely all the time. Defense then, territory 45 to 55. So again, Leinster were with plenty of the ball in the right areas as well, but couldn't actually make it count. Number of tackles 123 to 73 shows you that even though Stormers did most of the scoring, they also did most of the defending as well. Missed tackles, just 11 for the Stormers, 25 for Leinster, which is like, even like I talk about again, Leinster, it's not for them, it's not all about first up tackling. The scramble is there as well as a big safety net compared to any other team, but 74%, which is as we come on to tackle success, 92 to 74. 74% is just nowhere near where you need to be. Like we expected a decent first up defense in the URC to be somewhere around 85 to 88% is kind of normal. Leinster, normally you will see them being somewhere around 83, 84 is kind of normal for Leinster. But then again, the scramble makes up for that and actually ends up with them kind of being comparative to maybe an 88% tackling team. I feel, at least, I think if you run the numbers on points conceded, etc., you probably see that as well. And so 74, even for a team that aren't expected or don't generally, I'm not going to say expected, because I'm sure everybody's expected to make all their tackles. Well, you know what I mean. It's certainly not expected to miss tackles as much as they do, but 74%, even for a team like Leinster, who don't make that high percentage of the tackles normally, is still very low. 92 was really good for the Stormers, but I felt like Leinster helped them out with that, in that there wasn't really that cutting edge, so a lot of the tackles they were making were in the end pretty easy because there wasn't that kind of several options for Leinster. It felt like because of the issues that we're having in terms of people keeping their depth or picking out running lines, etc. You'd have a lot of the time where like a pod, you see a lot with Leinster, right? Ball carrier or the 9 or whoever the 10 distributing, they've got tons of options because they've got this pod and then they've got somebody at the back and then they can skip that pod and go to the next guy, etc., etc. Right? So they've got tons of options for them when they're attacking. But we saw a lot where from the base of a ruck, the first pod would be in such a place that you knew they weren't going to get the ball because they've already like come up and they're flat or they've just overrun it. And to give the ball to them, the player's going to have to catch it kind of behind them and then you strip them of all momentum. So it's not going to them. So you pretty much know the ball is going out the back instead. And it just made it much easier for the Stormers to read. And it wasn't always like that. There was, points where maybe the pod coming in were actually blocking the line for the pass going out the back. So that wasn't on either. So there's a lot of that where they just slight little bits being off meant that the Stormers could kind of discount certain things being available to Leinster, and it made it again a lot easier for them to defend it. But turnovers won then 4 for Stormers, 5 for Leinster. It wasn't one of those games though where like turnovers had a massive part to do in the game. The actual like not turnover but turnaround that mattered the most, I felt, was that early engage from Leinster in the scrum when they had a scrum right under the posts, and it looked like potentially they were going to go in to make it 30 points to 19, and again just put themselves in striking distance for maybe a losing bonus point. And the fact that the early engage and basically gave the ball to the Stormers, that was the most significant in terms of the ball being turned over, as it were, in the game. Onto kicking then. Kicks retained 5 for the Stormers, 2 for Leinster. I thought, the Stormers kicking game overall was better than Leinster's. They put up a lot of contestable kicks and they were winning those contests as well. I felt that with Leinster that like things like the maybe letting balls bounce or not being sure about whose ball it is and stuff like that as well. It didn't feel like they had people taking charge in terms of just leading that contest for those kicks as well. On to then penalties. Penalties conceded 12 for the Stormers, 11 for Leinster. Leinster conceding a lot of their penalties in the scrum, especially in that first half. Then on to players. 70 points from Manny Lebock. Great return from him. He's great. For me, he's a great player. I know he has his critics. Sometimes in really, really important tight games, his kicking go a little bit away from him, but it doesn't take away from the ability that the guy has generally as a player, and he's a good player to watch, I feel. Successful carries then, 5 for Evan Roos, who, again, another player that I have a lot of time for. Rob Russell with 8 for Leinster. Probably one of the standouts in what was a very poor performance. Clean breaks then, 2 for Loader and 2 for Russell. Defenders beaten then, Suleiman Hartzenberg 5 and 2 for Ben Brownlee. Didn't feel like Brownlee had that huge impact on the game, if I'm honest, but Hartzenberg certainly did. Meters made then, Warren Gallant with 80. Rob Russell making the most meters of any of the teams with 99 just tells you again, how he stood out in what was a poor performance. But for me, it's no surprise really, because Russell is probably one of the few players who's on went on this tour who has been breaking into kind of the first team, as it were, like the Champions Cup team, etc. Like he's made that, or beginning to make that transition, I feel there, and maybe if they had a few more players like him down there, maybe the South African tour might have gone a little bit different. But again, we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. Offloads then 2 for Wilmset and 2 for Charlie Natai. Natai normally, a decent guy to have there in the team, but you could see that those kind of surrounding him today, again, maybe it's just a familiarity thing, and it felt almost, from the Leinster point of view, like a warm up, like a preseason game or something like that. The kind of mistakes you see kind of early on in the season or before the season starts. On defense, then, number of tackles 13 for Ben Jason Dixon and 8 for Scott Penny. And then, that's pretty much what we're going to look at in terms of the stats. So let's talk about the two teams. We'll start with the losing team, Leinster. So, performance wasn't great. They did have that little spell where they kind of threatened to get themselves some way back into the game. I'm not going to say in contention to win the game, but maybe back into the game where they might have, gone out of town with some kind of bonus point. But Stormers definitely the better of the two teams. The scrum pretty much dominant for a lot of the game, and certainly a lot of the game in terms of that mattered. Because by the time Leinster kind of got theirs, functioning some way, they were already 30 points down. So, and it's hard then at that stage to say that Leinster sorting the scrum out actually had any impact really on the overall result of the game. But let's just talk about Leinster and this whole thing of the squad that they sent down. The squad they sent down this year, in fairness, is of a higher quality than the squad that went last year. Last year, we had, like, in Dublin, two separate teams, two separate Leinster teams who were preparing. Like, we had one team with all of the kind of Ireland capped internationals, etc. Like the first team were preparing for Champions Cup, and then we had another team that was full of the guys that we see kind of week in, week out in the URC, preparing for that game against Munster in the URC playoffs as well. And then it was a bunch of other players who were sent down to South Africa, and I'm pretty sure that some of the players that played last year have not played for Leinster since. I'm not sure. Some of them may have even kind of moved on. I know there were some promising players in that team as well, though, who kind of been set back by injury and stuff, and maybe they would have made appearances this year. But there are other players who that was probably maybe their last involvement with Leinster, at least to date. I'd have to look more into it, but I'm pretty sure if I look into that, that'll be the case. We did have the likes of Prendergast, doing well last year, in terms of like the win that they had, but still this year stronger team, but still not strong enough. And when we have things like people saying that like all the guff that the Bulls got right about the team that they sent for their Champions Cup quarterfinal, and they got a lot of stick for that. And at the time, I defended them because for me it was the way that their travel was going to go, etc. It really did put them on a bit of a hiding. It obviously didn't turn out well for them either, because they still ended up losing to Munster in the URC, even though they had their team preparing at home. But in terms of the decisions by the clubs themselves or the provinces or wherever, and the coaches, from my point of view, in terms of this, making this decision, Leo Cullen etc. That, well, the way I look at it is, there's a reason why those guys, people like him, are like director of rugby, or head coaches or wherever, right? And people like me are just talking crap on the internet, right? Because they obviously know a lot more than I do, but still, um, you know, honestly, I can't see the benefit of this. Some people will say, "Oh, it's good for development of young players and etc." But honestly, I'm not sure, because when I look at it, like there are young players, um, or there are players like in that Leinster team, right, who've the last few seasons have kind of struggled when things got tough, right? When we went into like two Champions Cup finals against La Rochelle, and we were under pressure, and ultimately we couldn't, deal with the pressure to the point that we weren't able to come up to score at the end last year, to get the win. We weren't able to defend the lead when we were going into the last few minutes, etc. And the same in the against Munster last year, in that semi final as well. That we weren't able to keep them out right at the death to prevent them from winning the game. And a lot of the players who were playing those games, I would have thought that they would have benefited from going down to South Africa with maybe not even doesn't even have to be like a full team, right? Because we see Leinster week in week out kind of mix their team up, where you might have maybe 8 of what we would call regular, starters, or like, and then maybe like a couple of the international guys in there as well, and then maybe like 2 or 3 of the standard of guys that we saw, like on this tour. We probably saw, maybe, I don't know, 15 guys like of that standard, where they're kind of in and around the wider squad, and not getting that many opportunities to start. Maybe they're getting places on the bench, etc. Send a team like that. It doesn't have to be the full team, but send a team like that and let them go down there and put in a decent performance. Because I don't feel like if you're getting absolutely hockeyed, like 40 points, 40 odd points to 12 or wherever it is, that it's going to be good for anyone's development, honestly. Like, I don't feel like that. You know, when teams come to the RDS, and if they get beaten well by Leinster, I don't think that the coaches are looking at that, looking back at the game, and say, well, that was great for the players' development, if you know what I mean. So, for me, I feel like, why not send a stronger team down there and have them kind of hardened for battle going into what is going to be a very tough knockout rugby, where they're going to face adversity, where they're going to have to learn to deal with it, and where they're going to have to like solve problems on the field, which they haven't had to do all that often, um, in the rest of the URC season. Why not let them do that, and then see how they go from there? I know there's a lot of kind of thing about, well, we don't want the players doing the traveling and etc. and whatever, but it's, again, like, I suppose the proof is going to be in the pudding, right? If Leinster go on and lift one or other of the trophies, obviously they want the Champions Cup more, but if they go on and lift either trophy, then the decision to do what they did these last couple of weeks will be vindicated. But again, honestly, on it, like, most of the time with stuff like this, I can see what the logic is behind it, but I'm a little bit lost with this. But onto the Stormers as well. Talked about, like, it's a really good win for them, but still, as a Stormers fan, I'd be worried at the fact that they wobbled that little bit when Leinster got the game going a little bit, and the fact that there were a lot of errors from them in the first half, and it was just that Leinster errors were keeping it at 0-0. You know, we could have easily seen, like, if Leinster had that little period that they did in, you know, the second half, around about the 50-minute period. If they had that at the start, maybe you would have seen Leinster in a little bit of a lead instead, and then those errors from the Stormers that in the end didn't matter at all, really, because of how things went in the rest of the game. But those errors happened early on. Leinster score a couple of tries, they're 12-0 up, and suddenly, you know, the confidence is knocked, and we could have maybe a very unlikely win for Leinster at that as well. So that is a bit of a worry going into this period of the season. You want to see your team, you know, coming into this period of the season where you know, there aren't many doubts about you know, how the team is playing, etc. Everybody kind of knows what the role is and what's going on. And it felt like, yes, Leinster were poor, but Stormers still didn't look like a team that you would kind of put your house on to say, okay, they're going to make the playoffs and they're going to do well in the playoffs. Now they do have like another 3 rounds to fix that by then, and then the playoffs as well after that. But still, you know, it is something that would be, for me, if I was a Stormers fan, would be a bit of a worry. But that's where we're going to leave it for that one. You know, going to be doing, right after this, and actually I'm recording the Connacht one because I watched both games live yesterday, but I didn't have like the time then because it was whatever. What time did the Connacht game finish at? Like after 10, I think was. I didn't have time to record 2 back-to-back videos after that, so I said I'd leave it for today, Sunday, to do that instead. But yeah, I'm going to record the Connacht one pretty much straight after I finish here in a second, and then we're going to have a review of the rest of the weekend as well. I didn't get to watch the Munster game live. I'd love to cover that, but I'm not, like, the way I look at it is like, yes, I know it was probably the most popular game of the weekend, and if I covered it, it probably would get more views. But 2 reasons why I don't want to do it. One is because I didn't watch the game live, and I try and watch games live or in full. And the second one is I haven't watched the game in full either. So I'm not going to kind of stitch some, you know, crappy review together based on a 5-minute 5-minute highlights package or something like that. I don't mind doing that if I'm covering like the round in review and just having like a kind of taster of the game, but I'm not gonna pretend that I watched the whole game when I didn't. I think that's dishonest, and whatever about my content, whether you enjoy it or not. At least I hope you think that it's honest, because that's what I try to maintain all the way through. But yeah, we'll have the Connacht game, and then we'll have the round in review as well, is probably going to come out on Monday, and we'll also have Women's Six Nations out on either Monday and Tuesday, or Tuesday, depending on how my schedule goes. Okay, so we're going to leave that there, and plenty more rugby to come.